Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ifat Adaya, and I work at the International Division of the Israel Innovation Authority on Government Relations and Program Management, and I look forward for this valuable webinar with the Medical Technology Enterprise Consortium, MTEC. I would like to invite Tami Vershevsky, who heads the business development efforts in America and Europe at the Israel Innovation Authority, to share some opening remarks. Tami, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ifat. Hi, Chuck. Happy to greeting you all on being with us today, sharing the webinar with our partner for MTEC. MTEC, a US-based medical technology consortium served by the Department of Defense in the US, with a focus on developing medical solutions that protect, treat, and optimize the health and performance of US military personnel and civilians. With the aim to ensure that unmet military medical needs and potential solutions are identified and developed. This is to say already the second time that we host this webinar with MTEC after a successful outcome from the previous year, in which 2 Israeli startups were awarded with funding and a generous fund and grant by the MTEC. So thank you for your partnership and joint vision. This is very important for us, and we appreciate this very much. In fact, we see this as a natural partnership between the Israeli Innovation Authority as MTEC. First, we strongly believe that we need collaborative ecosystem and global cooperation in order to speed up solutions for emerging needs. Second, the team is very much aligned with what we in the Israel Innovation Authority pinpoint as strategic areas of bioconvergence and health national programs that both are among our strategic areas of investments. Along the year, we work closely with the entire Israeli ecosystem players, supporting innovation in different ways, from direct investment in companies and pilot programs with pilot sites around the world, and working with strategic partnerships, also in run policy sandboxes. And through our strategic global partnership, we also bring unique partnerships and funding opportunities to the Israeli ecosystem, as we do today. And third, Israeli startups surely bring proven experience and unique capabilities in the areas of life-saving and medical solution, with various applications from biomedical solution, wearable, AI, field hospital, and many more. Those kind of innovation can also have application not only in battlefield, but also in additional use cases in extreme condition, disaster environments that needs emergency aids, and even in developing countries and remote areas where there is no access to modern health system. So we foresee huge global spending in this area in the coming years. We hope this webinar will be fruitful for you all, and wishing you good luck.
Thank you, Tami. And some logistics before we move on. Please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A tab. We will address them towards the end of the webinar. Our next speaker is Dr. Chuck Hattie, Biomedical Research Associate at MTEC. Chuck, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Yes, thank you for letting me be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone in the community. So as said, my name is Dr. Chuck Hattie. I'm the research associate for MTEC, the Medical Technology Enterprise Consortium. Hopefully you're all able to see my screen now. Yes?
Yeah, we see it very well. Thank you.
Perfect. Awesome. So Tammy's kind of already talked a little bit about what MTEC is, but I'll just give a brief overview of myself and then of MTEC as well. So I got my PhD a few years ago working on neurodegenerative and infectious diseases at the University of Rochester, and then spent a few years working on breast and ovarian cancers at the UT Southwestern. before having a hard shift into government contracting, where I kind of work as the first link in the chain that is our solicitation process. So for today's webinar, I wanted to give a little bit of an overview about what MTEC is, how we work, how you could work with us, and then we have a specific solicitation that's coming out that I want to go over a couple of the details and the focus areas that are going to be within it. Again, if you've got questions on them, please let me know. Feel free to put them in the Q&A function. I've got that pulled open so I can kind of see when things come in. If something's relevant, I can hit on it during the talk as well. So as Kemi said, MTEC is a nonprofit that works with the U.S. Department of Defense utilizing the Other Transaction Agreement in order to get funding extramurally. We're essentially one tool in the toolbox to get funding to or extramurally out of the government. They could use a lot of other mechanisms, and there's pros and cons for each of them. We're just one of those different tools. As we said, our main mission here is to facilitate prototype advancement. We're looking to find innovative technologies that we can bring to the warfighter. We're trying to fund those technologies' development so that we can better protect, treat, and optimize the health and performance of our U.S. personnel. As I said, there's a lot of pros and cons to all the different methodologies that a government can use to get funding extramurally. For the Other Transaction Agreement, a lot of the pros happen to be in being able to be more openly communicative with the community about what the military is looking for. We're able to be very specific about what we're looking for in a solicitation, as you'll see later this talk. But we're also able to answer any of questions that you have. So if you do have questions over how something's written, definitely feel free to contact me. For better or for worse, I write most of the solicitations, so it's always easy for you to contact me and say, hey, Chuck, I didn't understand this. I'm happy to get on a call or respond to your email to give you more clarity on what the sponsor is looking for. The other big benefit about how MTEC is structured is that we're a consortium model. So there's over 700 MTEC members, and that allows us to find people that are working on similar projects and potentially have them collaborate. So there's a lot of efforts that we fund that are teamed efforts, where we find two groups that are working on similar projects or projects that could synergize well together, and we can help them team together to create a more complete solution for the government. Another big benefit is that we do put out contracts. We don't put out grants. So the way that the contracts works is that you do have milestone payment schedules. And as you're completing the tasks, the government sponsor can see how well you're doing. And because it's a contract, they can easily modify it to add on additional follow-on funding. So over 50% of our awardees get follow-on funding from our government sponsors. So we continue the development of the project beyond what you just normally do. And then finally, the biggest reason for the military sponsors to come to MTEC is they're looking for where is the next innovation coming from. They know what the large organizations are doing. They know what large industry is doing. They don't necessarily know what small industry or academia is doing. And that's why they come to MTEC, because we can work with anyone, whether it's a US-based company or an international institution. So most of our members are non-traditional military contractors, and that's really a benefit for the military sponsors, because they can pull those communities that they don't know what products are being developed there and find good solutions for the military battlefield. As I mentioned, we do have over 700 members. Most of those are small businesses, providing those novel, innovative technologies. We do have several academic partners. About a seventh of our membership is academia. A benefit there is all the labs and startups that come out of those labs count as members. So there's a lot of innovation going on in the academic world, and we can kind of bring that to the military. We, of course, do have some large industry partners. Some of those are competing for awards, but most are looking at who gets on awards, seeing them as potential acquisition targets, seeing them as teaming partners in order to drive that innovation forward, drive that product development forward. And then we have a few other nonprofits and multi-member organizations, and I'm happy to talk about those in more detail after the talk. So MTEC really has 6 major focus areas. These are mirrored from our primary sponsor, the Medical Research and Development Command out of Fort Detrick in the United States. So everything from military infectious diseases, some combat casualty care topics, which include traumatic brain injury, blast injury, burn trauma, loss of limbs, things like that. Military operational medicine, which includes both physical and cognitive performance, mental health, musculoskeletal injuries, things like that. Medical info systems training and simulation really is focused on how do we optimize our training efforts so that we can have better prepared warfighters in coming battles. Clinical and rehabilitative medicine. So again, anything that has to do with regenerative medicine, pain management, sensory system traumatic injury, things like that. And then we do have some chemical and biological threat focus areas, predicting lethal exposures or limiting the spread of infectious agents. From these 6 different focus areas, we put out 10 to 12 solicitations a year. Some of them are very broad, covering a wide range of topics, like the one we're going to talk about later this talk, but other times they can be very narrow. For instance, one of the ones that we did was a sponsor wanted a handheld device that could quantify burn area and burn depth. Obviously, that's a very niche topic, so we do craft our solicitations based off of what the requirements that the military has. Sometimes they're very niche requirements, and sometimes they're broader requirements. So it's highly encouraged that you keep track of what solicitations we post and reach out if you have any questions about them. So the solicitation process we do, so like I said, we have 10 to 12 solicitations a year. It all starts with a military sponsor coming to us and saying, hey, this is the requirement we're seeing. And then I work with them to craft a solicitation. We get that passed by Army Legal, and then we post that publicly. Once we post a solicitation, we generally have a public webinar. So similar to this, but the military sponsor would be on that call. They'll go over their specific requirements. They'll talk about them. You'll be able to ask questions anonymously to make sure you have any questions you have answered. We also tend to also hold a teaming webinar, which is kind of like a Zoom meeting where you can come on and say, you have 5 minutes and 1 slide to say, this is what we're working on, this is what we do, these are our capabilities, and this is what we're missing in the solution. This is what we're looking for in a teaming partner. And so there's a lot of teaming interactions that happen in those kinds of webinars where you can find people that are working on similar projects and bring them into your team to make a more full proposal. Again, always recommend to talk to me as well during this time. If you have any questions, I'm happy to reach out and discuss them with you. If you do find a solicitation that you are interested in proposing for, you will have to become a member. Membership dues are $1,000 per year prorated by calendar quarter. So we always recommend you be able to point to something and say, this is why we joined MTEC, so that you can then become a member and have a clear idea about why you joined and get a clear benefit out of the membership as well. Also, if a solicitation comes out in April and you don't necessarily have to be a member in January in order to compete, you can always become a member in April and save yourself about $250, which can always be helpful. So once you submit a proposal, we will pass those proposals over to the military sponsors. These are they're technical representatives. They're either PhDs or masters in the relative subject, so you can be very specific about what you're looking for and what you're trying to accomplish. And then they'll evaluate your proposal and determine if you're ready for award or not. Regardless of what they choose to do, they will give you feedback as to what the strengths and weaknesses of your proposal are. So you can always shore up weaknesses or embolden strengths the next go around, whether you're submitting a new MTEC proposal or another proposal for another organization. That feedback can always be kind of helpful to hear from a military perspective. What did you hit? What did you not hit on in your proposal? As I said, they'll determine if you're ready for award or not. If you are ready, or if you are selected for award, there will be a brief negotiation period of about 2 to 4 months where you finalize your statement of work, submit a full cost proposal, have both of those evaluated and signed off, and then we get you on award. Again, 2 to 4 months to get that happening. We have a great contracts team. If you have any questions about that, hop on calls with them to talk them through. It's generally a lot easier than sending a million emails. But so I recommend hopping on calls with our contracts team if possible. There is a third option that our sponsors could choose to do when they're evaluating your proposal, which is putting you into a basket. This is an electronic holding area for proposals that they feel have a lot of technical merit, but they don't have any funding for just yet. So a lot of proposals will go into the basket, and the sponsors will try to find either off-cycle another project or wait for restoral funding or next fiscal year's funding in order to get your proposal pulled out of the basket and starting on award. Again, any proposal that goes in the basket is ready for award. It's just about finding that funding. If you do want to keep looking at our solicitations, definitely look at our website. And I'm happy to talk more about them after this as well. So this process, the solicitation process, has worked pretty well. We've put out over, I think it's actually now over 350 awards with over 100 or $1.27 billion worth of government funding, non-dilutive government funding going to those awardees. Our awards are generally $2 to $3 million a piece to start off with for a period of performance that are 2 to 3 years. That will, of course, depends on the scope of work. You know, if you are presenting or proposing a preclinical trial, $2 to $3 million works pretty well for that. If you're proposing a clinical trial, then you probably want to start your budget around 5 to 7 million, because that's what it's going to cost to get a clinical trial up off the ground. But a lot of projects will start around 2 to 3 million, and then as you progress through your period of performance, our sponsors will generally, if they really like you, again, they will add on additional funding, add on additional tasks, add on additional time. And so those 2 to 3 million for 2 years awards end up being 5 million for 5 years or 7 million for 7 years, or so forth. I just want to briefly highlight, there's a couple other aspects of MTEC beyond just the solicitations, and there could be some reasons for joining. So we do have an MCOR. This is a network of subject matter experts that have come together to provide their services to product developers. So there's a lot of great consultants here if you're looking for help with your regulatory status, or if manufacturing or scale up or contracting, any of those specific needs that you'll have as a product developer, you could find someone that has some expertise with those capabilities within our MCOR. And so you can always reach out to them and set up meetings and discuss whether they're the right fit for you as a teaming partner. I'm going to go back just a little bit because I think that's all one question. So generally this time frame for how long it takes for the sponsors to evaluate proposals is generally about a month and a half is probably how long it takes. Sometimes it does vary depending on how the fiscal year budget is progressing. As you may be tracking, Congress has a continuing resolution for the current fiscal year budget. As soon as that's passed, that's when sponsors tend to have funding and they can be a lot more decisive about their decisions. Just because without funding in the pocket, they don't want to say yes to anything. So I would always keep that in mind. Okay, so our second part of the talk today is just this upcoming solicitation. So we have a multi-topic. So this is multiple focus areas from multiple sponsors coming together to release one specific topic or one specific solicitation. We're set to release hopefully this week. That's my goal, is for it to be done. We're expecting the due date to be around February 17th, 2025 at noon Eastern Standard Time. That's kind of important. Definitely keep track of the noon Eastern Standard Time. I know that we're in a different time zone between the two of us, so definitely just keep that in mind. And then we'll be putting out, as this hasn't been released yet, we will send you the full announcement once it does get released. I'm happy to do that, along with this slide deck afterwards as well. So you can always look at that as well. Just a couple key aspects about this multi-topic. So the way that we have this acquisition for this one is an enhanced white paper. That's what we call our proposals. There will be a template that is provided within the solicitation itself so that you can actually see exactly what pieces of information the sponsors are looking for. Make sure you talk to those. We also have the selection criteria listed in the solicitation, so you can read the selection criteria and determine, you know, is this a good fit? Are we hitting the right marks? After you write your draft proposal, you can go back to the selection criteria and say, oh, we need to buff up this because they're going to be looking for that. For funding availability and the period of performance, there are a couple unique caveats to the funding that I talked about before. Like I said, most awards start at 2 to 3 million, but if there's any specified funding that our sponsors have for this particular effort, it will be listed within the solicitation, both in the individual topic areas as well as in a section dedicated to funding availability. So definitely keep a look at that. If you've got any questions, let me know. And then there are going to be unique requirements. We'll talk about those in a bit. I'll kind of run through all of the different topic areas we're going to have in this solicitation, but there are additional unique requirements for each of them. So definitely read through once it gets released. Definitely read through the topic areas you're interested in because there are specific unique requirements for each. And I already kind of mentioned a little bit about the criteria. You can find that, the selection criteria, you can always find that in section 5 of the RPP. There will be some limited feedback, so just be aware of that as well. And generally, I think that we should also talk a little bit about what kinds of technologies in general are we looking for. There may be, again, some unique requirements about what technology readiness level, that's this bar here, that you will have to meet in order to be eligible for awards for certain focus areas. But generally, MTEC funds projects within the TRL 3, which is an experimental proof of concept, up to about TRL 7, which is getting through regulatory clearance. The sweet spot is really TRL 4 to 7. So that's preclinical trials, clinical trials, FDA clearance studies. Those are the kinds of tasks that are generally funded through MTEC awards. So I would keep that in mind as you're designing your proposals, is that we're not going to be funding too early of technology. We need there to be at least an experimental proof of concept. And generally, our sponsors are going to be looking for things that are in the clinical or preclinical trial stage. The evaluation factors for this one, and we'll talk about a little bit here. So there are 3. The first is programmatic relevance. So how well the proposed prototype is aligning to the RPPs, the request for project proposals, focus areas, and the overall military impact. That's a very important one to make sure that you are military applicable. The second one, and probably your largest sections, are going to be about the scientific merit. Do you have a firm foundation of scientific data to support the development of your project now and into the future? They really want to see that there's a high likelihood of success if you were to get on award. And then the final evaluation factor is your commercial readiness. So how likely are you going to be able to progress to the commercial market if you were given an award? So in that case, have you engaged with the FDA? Any military products that need FDA clearance have to have FDA clearance. And so you definitely want to think about that when you're considering development of your project. Do you have the right team and structure together in the resources in order to see the project through, again, in this stage, but also can you call on additional resources for future stages? So do you have a good team together for a preclinical trial, but have you thought about the IRBs or anything else that you would need for a clinical trial? Those are the kinds of pieces of homework that they want to see showcased in a proposal. And again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. And then just a couple other little metrics about MTEC and MTEC awards. So again, the average TRL, the technology readiness level for an awardee, is 4 or 5. Again, that's in that preclinical, early clinical trial phase. About 50% of our projects progress 1 TRL during the period of performance. So that can be a good way to track how much should I propose. What do you need in order to progress from a TRL 4 to a TRL 5? That's kind of the tasks that you should be proposing. And then role of care, just I want to briefly call that out. As you well know, we're trying to push products as far forward as possible, where it can be really utilized on the front lines. That's a role of care 1. So as far forward as you can is very valuable and is a huge component of a proposal. But we do fund projects within all roles of care, especially if they do have maybe a version 1 is a TRL4, which is kind of a US or definitive care hospital. But maybe it has a version 2 down the line that could become a TRL3 or a role of care 3. And maybe down the line of version 4 becomes a role of care 1. So definitely think about what does your product look like now, but what could it look like in the future as well. And then finally, I want to broadly define the prototype definition. I know I've talked about it a little bit, that you have to meet a prototype level and experimental proof of concept, but it's not necessarily just a medical device or a vaccine or a diagnostic, which we normally consider prototypes. There are going to be some focus areas that focus around information technologies or model development or clinical best practice guidelines optimization. All of those can be considered prototypes as well. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about this focus areas. We've got 10 major focus areas. The first 5 are dealing with infectious diseases. The first one is really looking for prophylactics to prevent infection in penetrating wounds. So we're talking about gunshot victims when they have infections deep within their wound. How do we prevent the infections there? And we're really looking for solutions that are 3D conformable to whatever the wound shape is, but also can be self-absorbing or removable through irrigation. And they have to be effective at least against one of these 4 pathogens, either Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, Actinobacter, or Staphylococcus. Those are really the 4 that we're looking at. And then it's going to be helpful for you to have FDA engagement documents, toxicology studies, and any preclinical efficacy data that you have can be really helpful for proposing for this particular focus area. The second one is countermeasures against sepsis caused by wound infection. So this is any drug or biological treatment for sepsis. Again, looking for that preclinical efficacy data and toxicology data and any work that you've done with the FDA. This is obviously a little bit broader, as it's really just looking for any treatment that works with sepsis. Sepsis is a very difficult target, and so they're really looking for whatever the next best solution would be. Antivirals for endemic or emerging infectious diseases. So broadly acting antivirals is kind of what we're looking for. We're looking for solutions that are effective at least against either some of the bunnivirulins order of viruses or the dengue viruses, hopefully effective against all 4 serotypes of that. So definitely keep that in mind as you're doing that. Again, toxicology studies, FDA engagements, those are going to be looked for as well on this. The 4th focus area is endemic diarrheal diseases. I think it's something like 60% of all US deployed personnel experience some sort of diarrheal disease upon deployment. So any solutions that can affect that, whether it's travels diarrhea, norovirus, et cetera, those are really helpful in order to optimize the health and performance of our US warfighters upon deployment. Should be no surprise, preclinical efficacy data, toxicology studies, FDA engagement notes, those are always going to be useful here as well. Focus area 5, we shift from some of the more material component or solutions to more of knowledge product solutions. So in this, we're looking to find optimized ways of care or optimize clinical best practice guidelines for a few of those different areas that I just mentioned. So optimizing sepsis or combat polytrauma infections, optimizing traumatic wound care management, especially for acute wounds, or leveraging some polytrauma models of infection to evaluate emerging solutions or therapeutics. So really developing any of these as a knowledge product more than a material solution. So the government's coming to you as subject matter experts to propose what you think would be the best solutions, or how would we move forward? How should we be moving forward? What is new on the horizon that we should be watching out for? That's kind of what we're looking for here. Focus area 6 is all to do with musculoskeletal injury. There are 6 subcategories for this one. And so there's a little bit of overlap between these, but they are distinct. So you will submit to one or multiple of these. Each time that you submit for a new focus area, you will have to submit a new proposal. So definitely make sure each proposal is distinct. You probably don't need to do that for musculoskeletal injury. The same person that is evaluating 6.1 is going to be evaluating 6.5. So you can have the same, you can call out that my solution is mostly applicable to X, but it may also be applicable to Y, and they'll be able to understand and elucidate that. So the 6 focus areas for this one, looking for screening tools or strategies to mitigate musculoskeletal injury risk. Focus area 6.2 is interventions or programs to mitigate the incidence or severity of musculoskeletal injury. Focus area 3.3 is diagnostic solutions for deployed service members, especially in those austere environments, and enabling care beyond what is currently in the scope of care. And then focus area 6.5 or 6.4, scalable and rapidly deployable material solutions to support forward treatment of musculoskeletal injury and reduce the impact. And then finally, 6.5 is rehabilitative interventions to accelerate recovery from musculoskeletal injury in a pre-hospital environment. So I would also keep a look at if you are interested in musculoskeletal injury product development, I would definitely look through some of the background information that will be provided with this, as well as some of the other considerations. There are a few. So I'm happy to talk about those in a little bit, but I would definitely keep those in mind and read through this section very clearly before you say, yes, I'm going to be applying for this one. Focus area 7 is pharmacogenetic testing for military readiness. So really this is looking to establish a pilot study for conducting pharmacogenetic testing on our pre-deployed military, but hopefully more also actively deployed. Really looking to prevent some adverse drug reactions or optimize drug dosing, again, using the pharmacogenetic studies that you've done in the past and insights you've gained in the past to really optimize the health and performance of our U.S. warfighters. Focus area 8 is sensory system. Again, there's 5 sub areas in this one. So the first ones are improved pain control or anesthesia. We've got one for ocular injury stabilization. So stabilizing that injury as soon as possible, preferably at the point of injury, to help maintain sight later on. Tools and solutions to understand and assess auditory injury. Obviously, auditory injury is a major concern within any war zone. So really trying to look for any tools or assessment technologies to characterize, assess, and prevent auditory injury. 8.4 is ocular injury assessment, sorry. Looking for development and validation of diagnostic tools to assess ocular injuries sustained in combat environments. And then ocular injury treatment as well. So any current or improvements or development of treatments for ocular injuries that were sustained by combat scenarios. Again, this is another section that I would definitely look at, not only the background information, but also some of the additional considerations that are listed, because those could be helpful when you're designing your proposal. 2 more focus areas. The 9th focus area that we have is intracranial pressure monitoring. So we're looking for an intracranial pressure monitor that can be deployed in role of care 1 and utilized throughout the roles of care. Hopefully a non-invasive ICP monitor. I will note that they are looking for a relatively high technology readiness level. So by the end of the period of performance, it should be a TRL 9 or I'm sorry, TRL 6 or higher. So it probably starts at around a TRL5 is probably what I'm expecting. You might be able to get away with a TRL4 technology, but really a TRL5 or more is probably what they're looking for at minimum. And then the 10th focus area is precision nutrition development. So again, this is a little bit of a pilot study to really see if we can have specific nutrition or macromolecules delivered into warfighters' food or beverage contents to optimize their health and performance. So again, a little bit of a targeted trial or targeted test study. For both of these studies, the government is providing the military personnel that would be utilized in the study, but you need to bring the expertise and the knowledge in order to actually set up the study and have it perform well and have actionable metrics come out of it as well. And with that, I know we've got a couple questions in the chat, so I'm happy to go through them, but definitely let me know if you've got questions. I'm happy to set up a call and discuss in more detail, especially as the solicitation comes out. I will be off next week until the 2nd of January, but as soon as that hits, I'm happy to set up calls and really dive into the various subjects that we have here, the focus areas that we have here. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Fat.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you very much. So as you mentioned, we have a few questions. I would like to move on and address them. So the first question is MTEC membership required? And if so, what are the benefits?
Yeah, great question. So I mentioned it briefly before. So MTEC membership is required for competing for solicitations. The main benefit that people see for joining MTEC is to compete for a solicitation. There are some additional benefits. So, access to some of the discounts provided by the MCOR, the subject matter experts, service providers that are helping with product development. Some of those have discounts for MTEC members. We also do have some in-person meetings. So I don't have slides with them here, but if you go to our website, I'm happy, on our front page, there are some in-person meetings that are coming up. One for platelet technologies and another one for our MTEC annual meeting. Our annual meeting, we have all of our military sponsors come out. They give presentations on what their current and upcoming priorities are. They have Q&A sessions afterwards, so it can be a great opportunity for you to see them, to hear them speak, to listen to what the military is actually thinking about your focus area. They're walking around in full dress uniform, so you can pull them off the side and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. Does it make sense? Does it not? So you can definitely get some value out of that. A lot of people join MTEC either right before the annual meeting or before a solicitation that they would like to compete for. A lot of people join for the solicitations. I will kind of characterize that.
Thank you. We have here a question about the topic of interest. What about PTSD or CPTSD?
Yeah, that's a great question. So those are highly interested areas within our military sponsors. Like I said, we have 6 major focus areas that MTEC works within, and there are dozens of military sponsors, so portfolio managers that deal with a wide variety of technologies and that are being developed. For PTSD and CPTSD work, there's one portfolio that's definitely interested in that. Again, part of it is finding the right funding to come to them. So you might be tracking Congress, and it's taking them a bit to get funding actually appropriated. Once that gets appropriated, we tend to have topics that come out. I think we do a PTSD topic every year or every other year. So I would keep an eye out for future solicitations that have it, but none in this one.
Mm-hmm. What is the typical time frame for proposal review and award decisions?
Yeah, another good question. So generally, we're looking at about a month and a half from the due date is about when our military sponsors are able to evaluate all the proposals and make a funding decision. But again, that changes a little bit depending on how Congress acts.
So can we say that should companies expect to see final results towards the end of 2025 or?
Good question. Yeah. So for this particular solicitation, any awards that are going to be funded using fiscal year 25 funding has to be approved by April 1st, I believe, April 1st, 2025. And to get on award, it would have to be awarded by September 30th, 2025. So I would keep an eye out for those dates. There is a lot of funding that'll be fiscal year 26 funding within this particular solicitation. So again, looking at that funding availability section can be helpful to determine whether you would whether you would have to hear by April 1st. So for instance, the intracranial pressure, I think, is for fiscal year 25 funding. So they'll have to get their decisions done by April 1st versus maybe the musculoskeletal injuries topic area has some fiscal year 26 funding. So it may take them a little bit longer. So look through the solicitation. And again, I'm happy to kind of elucidate that and tease that out a little bit more in a one-on-one conversation.
We have here two questions related to VA. I assume it's Veteran Administration based on the context. If we are already working with the VA, will this exclude us? This is the first question. The second question is, will partnering a VA hospital that wants to pilot our solution will add points to our submission?
Great questions. So already working with the VA does not exclude you from MTEC awards at all. One of the benefits is that we are not restrictive, so you can work with anyone that you would like. You can get multiple sources of funding to come work on a project as long as you're not double dipping on the same task. So two sources of funding can't fund the same task, but as long as you're working on the same project and working on different tasks, it can still get multiple sources of funding. It will really depend on how you propose and how you spin the project will determine how many points, working with a VA or working with a DoD lab will add to the proposal. It obviously is bringing a lot of expertise to the proposal, to the project. You're working closely with people that will actually be using it. That's very useful. But I will note that a lot of our military sponsors are looking less at VA hospitalizations, VA complications, and looking more at battlefield complications, battlefield injuries. So I would recommend trying to shift focus. So, if something happens at the VA, it's important. Don't get me wrong. There's funding opportunities for that, but I would try to put it in as much context that you can for the far forward battlefield as well.
The next request is, please, can you talk more about the IP?
Yeah, so for all of these focus areas, so we have a whole IP section within the solicitation, within each of our solicitations. Most of the time, we are looking for you to control all the IP. That's kind of what's going to be required because we're looking for products to get developed. And in order for it to get fully developed, fully commercialized, you have to be controlling of the IP. There's some general data rights that the government has in order to be able to see your data, be able to share it internally, things like that. But on a large scale, you're controlling the IP.
Okay. That's an important question. Does MTEC accept proposals addressing multiple focus areas?
Yeah. So we should, contact me after this and we can talk about it a little bit more. In general, the answer is no. You should really focus on one focus area to submit a proposal to. If you have multiple aspects of a technology that could fit into different focus areas, you can submit multiple, but each proposal you submit should be unique by itself. So I would keep that in mind. But again, happy to talk more about it offline.
For the incoming solicitation, can I submit proposal focusing TRL 3+ on controlling hemorrhage? Let's say under MSKI injury focus area 6/4?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it probably won't be hemorrhage control. That's not really what this particular sponsor is looking to fund within their portfolio. If you want to send me a little bit more context, I'm happy to look at it and see if it does fit or pass it along to see if they're interested. But my gut is saying probably not.
Is there any interest in artificial oxygen carriers for field emergency treatment?
Yes, there's interested, but it likely will not, it's not in this particular solicitation. Again, there may be some more solicitations that come out later this year that may have some of those topic areas.
Okay, so someone here mentions our technology doesn't fit in any of the focus areas, but could be very relevant for military scenarios. What would you advise them?
Yeah, I recommend setting up a meeting with me, sending me a little blurb about what your technology is, and let's talk a little bit about how well that fits with our sponsors, doesn't fit. Again, it might be that your technology will be fun, or there'll be a solicitation for that technology later this year. But I just don't know with the information provided. Yeah.
Okay. How should the solution be connected to the military? If you're already developing a medical solution and prototype, does it need to address one of the specific solicitations, or can it be submitted independently? How can you determine if a solution meets the necessary criteria?
Yeah, so kind of similar to the last question, I would recommend contacting me, sending me a blurb about what the technology is that you're working on. For any project that's awarded through MTEC, it has to have been solicited for first. So there has to be a solicitation for you to submit a proposal to. But we can talk a little bit about what that looks like and how likely if you want to contact me.
Does the FDA accelerate military apps?
So there is pressure for the FDA to be more open with people that are working on technologies across the board and be more helpful. But there's no accelerated, expedited process specifically for the military, or that we commonly use. Again, generally we're looking for products that are able to get through commercial markets, so they need to go through the commercial regulatory clearances in order to do that.
We have here a few questions about the recording and the presentation. So as we mentioned before, as soon as the call for proposals will be published, I will send email to you all together with the recording and the presentation. So this is about the logistics. And now, is it possible to apply a project in early stages and that in order to get proof of concept?
So again, we're actually legally required to fund only things that are at a prototype level or above. So we can't fund any basic science research just by the way that we're under a prototype other transaction agreement. So that means that we have to fund a TRL 3 or above. So we wouldn't be able to fund any basic science work to get you to that level.
Okay.
I will also say that we do have a bridge loan program that might be able to do that. So feel free to contact me after that, and I'm able to talk about that a little bit more.
We have here another question related to IP restrictions of the project. And you referred to that before, but maybe you can, the audience can find some more information in your website related to that.
So
So they
definitely
can
look at
read
our
it.
website, but I would highly recommend reading through the IP sections of the particular solicitations. Those tend to be, we craft them very specifically based off of each solicitation. So Again, generally, neither MTEC nor the DoD is looking to control IP. We're looking for, or the DoD is looking for data rights. MTEC is not getting royalties on anything. We're just a go-between for getting military contracting out there.
What are the average success percentages, and when will chemical and biological treats solicitation will be available?
Yeah, so it really depends on the solicitation itself. As you can all imagine, if a solicitation is worded very specifically, there may only be 3 proposals that get submitted, and therefore, if one gets selected, you get a higher rate of acceptance. Versus if there's a broader topic area for like musculoskeletal injury, for instance, you may have 30 people submit, and then if only one gets submitted or selected, you may have a lower rate of acceptance. So it's really hard to pinpoint what that would look like. I would say on average, we have better acceptance rates than NIH or SBIR or CDMRP. But, you know, it really is on a solicitation by solicitation basis.
What about MDD? Is there any interest in that?
So if I'm correct, with the MDD being the European Union's regulation authority, it's interesting, it is, but any product will have to be FDA cleared in order for it to be utilized by the MTEC or for the military. So I would keep that in mind. And even if you go after EU regulatory clearance, US regulatory clearance should also be on the horizon if you're trying to get funding through MTEC.
Does Israeli company need American partner in order to apply?
Great question. The answer is no. So the benefit of the other transaction agreement is the government can work with anyone in the world as long as you're a nation of good repute, as determined by the State Department. So Israel is, you as an Israeli company can apply for an MTEC award and be on award without any US counterpart or partner.
What about injury as a result of damage to the skin, for example, burns?
Great question again. Again, one of those topic areas that I think our sponsors are waiting to see what the budget looks like in order for them to put out solicitations. So check back, you know, regularly to see what solicitations are posted.
Does the entity awarded need to be an existing incorporated entity?
That's an interesting question. So there are a couple of pieces of information that you will need in order to become an MTEC member, such as a SAM.gov unique entity ID and a cage code. And so both of those are identified in our MTEC membership application, and there's links to achieve those different codes. So I would keep a look at that. So yes, you will need to have some sort of identification as an entity. And then there's some more information on our website.
What is the process to try to interest a sponsor in a potential project?
So again, I think the way forward with that one is contact me, send me a blurb. I can let you know a little bit. If I don't have an insight, I can pass it along to the sponsor I think is most relevant and see if there's any interest there. So definitely feel free to get in touch.
Okay. Regarding the mitigation of infectious disease, does it have to be directly connected to war zones? For instance, a solution for women soldiers that can solve a vaginal infection that affects about 75% of women. Can this be included as well?
So for infective diseases, we're really looking at specific solutions being looked for. It's not really a broad call. It's more of a, like I said, so let me just kind of go back to some of them. Where's my pointer? So really looking for countermeasures against these particular pathogens, Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, and Actinobacter staphylococcus. If there are other pathogens that are also hit, that's great. But we really need solutions against these particular ones. And again, part of this solution or part of this focus area is finding a way to administer those antimicrobials to the wound, to a deep penetrating wound caused by potentially a gunshot or a large traumatic event. When we're talking about sepsis, again, as long as you're hitting sepsis, that's great. If it hits other targets, that's better. So if you've got data supporting the inclusion of your product in one of these focus areas based off of what they're looking for, definitely feel free to include that. But otherwise, we're not really looking at, just any infectious disease, even if it is highly prevalent. The reason for that is there are other funding mechanisms that do broader context solicitations that cover things like vaginal diseases and things like that. So I would keep that in mind as well. We're really focused on far forward infections rather than generalized infections.
What about women's healthcare, specifically gene diagnostics?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we haven't put out any solicitations for that yet. I think part of it is that because those kinds of diagnostics are relevant to 50% of the population, whether they are in the military or not, they tend to have other funding mechanisms in order to get funding to them. There has been a push to have some women's health topic areas pushed through the military specifically. I haven't seen them yet, but I know there's been talk about it. So there may be some coming out in the future, but I don't have any insight at this time.
So a previous question regarding MDD was referred to major depressive disorder.
Oh, okay, good question. Yes, so for that, there is interest, but that would fall within the psychological health portfolio. Again, they're waiting to put out a solicitation, hopefully in the February-March timeframe, for that specific kind of topic. So I would be on the lookout for that then.
Can academic projects apply, or you must be a company?
You can be an academic project. Again, one of the hard parts for academia is that we aren't basic science funding. We are looking for product development, whether that's material or knowledge product development. So definitely feel free to contact me. We can talk a little bit about what you're working on and see if it's the right fit or not. But there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to submit if you're fitting the solicitation, right?
How can a company join your SMEs list?
Great question. There's a link on our website to learn more about the MCOR. And then if you send me an email, I'm happy to get you in touch with the director of the MCOR, and he can talk a little bit about what they work on and how you can become a member of that. But there's an easy application process in order to become a member, an MCOR partner.
In the presentation, you wrote that 85% of awarded projects are teamed. Does that mean single small companies or startups are unlikely to win award when submitting alone?
I wouldn't say that's necessarily true. I think again, our military sponsors are looking for the next best thing, right? Like, so they're looking for the best solution. If it truly is that you're able to complete a project by yourself without any teaming partners and able to get it to where it needs to be, then that's fantastic. That number is a little bit inflated because sometimes projects start with just one team, and then as they progress, they need to add on additional partners to help advance the technology beyond. Because one team might not have all the experience needed in order to go through all the stages needed. I mean, when we're talking about preclinical trials, clinical trials, FDA clearance, all of those have unique areas of expertise that may not be satisfied by just a single organization. So I would think about that a little bit as you're you're developing your proposals. And again, happy to discuss them, and feel free to contact me and we can talk a little bit more.
Someone is asking about head trauma. Is this in a topic?
So I would look at the intracranial pressure topic, intracranial pressure monitor topic. We have some very specific guidelines on what is actually being looked for in here. So I definitely read in the solicitation when it comes out what they're looking for and seeing that that fits with your technology.
Does the solution should be implemented in a battlefield setting or, for example, in a regular rehab setting?
It depends a little bit on the solution that you're providing. Generally speaking, we're looking for things that could become battlefield solutions. So even if it's utilized in, a therapeutic home or something like that now, does it have a potential for transitioning to an austere environment? What would that look like? Have you done some homework on how that would occur? Again, if you want to give me a little bit more context, feel free to email me. Email's right here on the slide, so I'm happy to talk through a little bit more about what you're working on.
Are there any limitations on the size of a company that can apply?
Great question. So no, there's no size limitations or restrictions. There are two kinds of applicants. There's the non-traditional military contractor, any small business or academic group, things like that. And then there's a traditional military contractor. We've got some definitions for what those are on our website, but kind of briefly, a traditional military contractor has at least $50 million worth of awards with the US government within the last 5 years or something like that. So if you're a traditional military contractor, we do require cost share of 1/3 of the project, unless you have significant input from non-traditional military contractors. So a lot of times, large corporations will partner with smaller ones in order to fulfill that non-traditional military contractor status. Again, happy to talk a little bit more, but there's no restrictions on who gets awarded.
The call for proposals is once a year. What if we're ready to submit in a few months from now? Is there any second deadline?
Yeah, good question. So we don't necessarily have the same topics come around every year. It is really dependent on what the sponsors are looking for, what they're looking for in their portfolio, what requirements have been handed down from either Army Command or Congress for them to be able to propose or to make solicitations for. So I would keep track of all the solicitations that come out. Again, if you're talking about your product, I'm happy to talk about a little bit more, and we can chat about, when would be a good fit? Would it come around sometime soon? Something like that.
So thank you again, Chuck. We've reached to the end of this webinar. As we mentioned before, the call for proposals should be published in a few days, and then we will email everybody the published call for proposals together with the recording of the webinar and the presentation. I wish you all best of luck on collaborating with Chuck and with MTEC, and have a good day.
Thanks everyone for coming. I appreciate y'all's questions.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.